Hey everyone, welcome! Today we're diving straight into a brand new explainer, breaking down the source material behind a truly fascinating behavioral shift. We're looking at exactly why the smartest people in the room eventually stop arguing and instead learn to completely weaponize their silence. If you've ever felt totally exhausted or just misunderstood by debates that go absolutely nowhere, this breakdown of the research is going to change exactly how you view your own daily interactions.
So think about this for a second. Have you ever been right in the middle of a heated argument with someone who is just so clearly, obviously wrong, and suddenly you just stop talking? You just completely hit the brakes. You probably felt this weird, quiet wave wash over you. It's a really profound moment. You suddenly realize that trying to prove your point to this specific person is actually a massive waste of your own biological resources.
And our sources hit us with a pretty jarring reality check here. They say, reasoning with a Dunning-Kruger crowd is like giving medicine to a corpse. Ouch, right? But the point is, going silent in these moments is definitely not passive surrender. You aren't just giving up or losing your fire. What you're actually executing is a highly calculated preservation of your mental energy. It's basically an advanced survival blueprint that your brain has installed just to protect itself.
Let's jump into Section 1, the Dunning-Kruger trap and the futility of the confidently wrong.
We all know exactly who we're talking about, right? It's that person confidently explaining, say, quantum physics to you after watching a single 60-second TikTok. And when you try to politely correct them with actual verifiable facts, they just double down. But our sources define the Dunning-Kruger effect as way more than just everyday arrogance. It's a literal metabolic trap. Here's the catch. The skills someone needs to actually be good at something are the exact same skills they require to recognize that they are currently terrible at it. Because they don't know what good actually looks like, they literally cannot see their own incompetence. So, attempting to use facts against someone who has fundamentally renounced reason, it's a completely futile endeavor. It's honestly exactly like two colorblind people passionately arguing about shades of red. They literally lack the biological equipment to perceive the reality you're trying so desperately to show them. Once you really understand this, you start to realize why trying to win them over is just so physically draining.
All right, moving on to Section 2, your brain on arguments and the hidden biological tax.
Let's actually shift gears from psychology to the intense neuroscience happening right inside your skull during these toxic interactions. When a high-stress argument kicks off, your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for complex logic and heavy lifting, just goes into absolute overdrive. It's a high-performance engine, and during an argument, it burns through glucose like a furnace. But here's the really dark reality. As it burns all that energy, your brain accumulates this toxic sludge called glutamate. You are physically polluting your own brain just trying to make a point.
And that brings us to what the sources call the acetylcholine trap. If you're a high-functioning person, your brain actively recruits massive amounts of biological resources to try and solve the impossible social puzzle of this argument. But because the puzzle literally cannot be solved, because the other person absolutely refuses to see reason, you just end up completely depleting your reserves. It leaves you feeling totally mentally hollow and disconnected from everything.
Which perfectly sets up Section 3, social resource optimization, or the brain's internal accountant.
The good news here? Your brain doesn't just sit around and suffer endlessly. It actually adapts. And it does this through a fascinating little process driven by the insula. Think of your insula as this super strict internal accountant. Its entire job is to calculate whether a specific action is truly worth the biological effort you're about to expend. So when you're faced with one of those confidently wrong people we talked about earlier, your insula runs the numbers, and it very quickly flags the interaction as having strictly negative value.
And honestly, this is exactly why you go quiet. Your brain literally refuses to run that energy-draining prediction model for someone who is never, ever going to change their mind. Your internal accountant simply denies the transaction. It looks at the ledger and says, nope, the biological ROI on this conversation is absolutely zero. We are shutting it down.
Now for Section 4, the power of silence and how to weaponize indifference.
This is where we hit a massive paradigm shift in this explainer. Reframing your silence from a sign of weakness or giving up into a high-status, biologically optimized power move. The sources refer to this as status by indifference. Look, we live in a culture that is absolutely addicted to noise. Everyone wants to have the last word, right? But when you have the discipline to let silence just sit there in the room like a heavy piece of furniture, you create a massive power vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum.
While the other person is scrambling and stuttering to fill that void with more nonsense, your silence is actively exposing their deepest insecurities.
So what are the big takeaways for us? First off, you've got to start treating meaningless arguments as emotional pollution that you simply refuse to drink. Second, view your own peace of mind as an exclusive VIP club. Not every unproductive provocation gets an invite past the velvet rope. And finally, you transition into the enlightened observer. You stop being a button that other people can just press whenever they want a reaction. You become highly socially selective.
See, when you argue with everyone, you're basically trapped in an external locus of control. You constantly need to prove a point just to feel validated, and your identity gets totally tied up in whatever team you're defending. But by weaponizing your intellectual silence, you shift to an internal locus of control. You start valuing internal clarity and peace above absolutely everything else. Your identity becomes entirely self-authored. You know what's true, and you don't need a confidently wrong stranger to validate it for you.
Which brings us to a real point of celebration. If you found yourself staying completely quiet lately while everyone else in the room is just yelling and losing their minds, well, congratulations. According to the research, you are likely a psychological unicorn. You've bypassed all the noise and reached your cognitive peak. Your intelligence has evolved into its most efficient, radical form. True intellectual humility paired with silent observation.
So, I want to leave you all with this final, provocative thought today. At what exact point did you realize silence was your greatest weapon? Think back to that precise moment your internal accountant finally closed the ledger and told you to just stop arguing. If this resonated with your brilliant but exhausted brain, take a second to drop a comment and share your experience below. Protect your peace, never let someone else's chaos rewrite your reality, and I will see you in the next explainer.